Friends, welcome back. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Marshall.
I'm opening today because Marshall's a little bit under the weather with his voice. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the resurrection. You know, and what have we found in recent times, especially in the times of today, is that churches don't really preach the resurrection unless like it's on Easter, which it's just touching on it at that point, right? Yeah. And so what we're finding in a lot of people is like even in churches there are people that don't believe like a lot of how the resurrection actually happened, or there's some there's no details to it. Like if you were to ask somebody, a layman, if you didn't go to your Bible, can you tell me how the resurrection is true? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like most people would not be able to do that.
Yeah.
But we have some research here that we're going to give you that will prove to you that, hey, not only was the resurrection true, but these reasons that are set here would hold up like in the court of law, I guess you would say. You know, it's the highest probability. So what we're going to do first is ask the question, why does the resurrection even matter in the Christian faith? And I'm going to let Marshall read a scripture here, and we'll go from there.
We got 1 Corinthians 15. I'm going to start at verse 12. This is Paul. He says, "Now if Christ be preached that he rose from the dead, how say some among you that there is no resurrection of the dead? But if there be no resurrection of the dead, then is Christ not risen? And if Christ be not risen, then our preaching vain, and your faith is also vain." The Christian, the whole Christian like religion is based upon a historical event that really happened. And if Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, then our whole faith is in vain, because our whole faith hangs upon that event happening.
Right. Like if Jesus Christ didn't die, what would be the difference between believing in Christianity and believing in a fairy tale?
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any difference.
Right.
It'd be all for naught. We'd be doing this because we're dumb, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
totally.
Like it would be one of those things where you're like, maybe you should question your brain, and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Well, there's definitely a purpose to it, because, if Christ didn't die for our sins, then the sacrifice wasn't made. Therefore, death wasn't killed. Death wasn't eliminated.
Yeah.
And our nature still rules us, and we're just sort of an accident. And everybody else can be right about whatever.
Life is, there's no purpose to life, and make your own meaning.
Exactly.
So yeah, for Christianity to be true, well, actually that's what I was going to say. Something that Sean McDowell has said is the reason I'm a Christian is because Christianity is true. Yes,
and that is the reason why I'm a Christian. You know what I mean? I have fought this thing. Don't get me wrong, because even though you're a Christian, you run into your own sinful nature, and you end up doing things, and then you start questioning whether you believe or not. Because why would you do these things if you believed, and all these kind of things? And then it starts to question whether God is real and all that kind of thing, and you have those kind of doubts in your spirit. And what it did for me was just make me go more into the Word, research more about what happened with Jesus, what was going on at the time, those kind of things. And of course, my faith has only been strengthened by those questions, which I think that happens for like 99% of Christians. Unless we fall for like the New Age movement, I think that the deconstruction movement is really dangerous.
Yeah.
Because it basically leads to what would you call it? You would call it non-truths.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That so people believing something that's never been true.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And those non-truths are your own truth. That's a non-truth right there.
Yeah,
and that's
right.
sort of the whole core of the New Age movement. It's like your own truth is the truth.
Yeah, it's just elevating yourself to become God. It's just the same lie that Satan told Adam and Eve, you will be as gods. It's the same thing. That's what New Age is. It's just you are God.
You are God, yeah.
You can determine all the truth and all reality.
And that's the same thing that happened early on during Babylon and all that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, is everybody, believed in whatever God they wanted to, and they lived however they wanted to.
Yep.
So
So what we got? This is going to be like I don't know how many videos we're going to do.
Yeah.
But I pitched this idea to Jonathan that I wanted to talk about the resurrection, why it matters, and then the evidences for the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Then I want to talk about the law,
Mm-hmm.
why God had to give the law, and then I want to talk about the sacrificial system, what the sacrificial system means, why it had to be implemented, and then understand how Jesus fulfilled the law and fulfilled the sacrificial system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the overview of what we're going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take a few episodes. But today, specifically, we want to just go over the good evidences why that Jesus rose from the dead is actually the most reasonable explanation. Even if you just look at this from just a logical, critical standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
it's the best explanation as to why Christianity is here today.
Okay. So there's a lot of things that, like they say out there, as far as like reasons not to believe. So as we were discussing earlier, you were telling me, well, he never really even died.
Right.
Like it was like a dramatic event, right?
Right.
Where he was nailed to a cross. Okay, well,
Yeah.
We're already getting into slippery waters here. Nailed to a cross.
Yeah.
And then just before he died,
He
woke up and
Right.
like split, right?
Yeah, that's called the swoon theory, that Jesus really never really died. So there's two kind of main reasons why this is just absolutely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So while Jesus was in custody, right, he went back and forth from Herod back to Pilate, from the Jewish authorities. They were all trying to determine whether or not, because the Pharisees wanted to kill Jesus for the crime of blasphemy.
Mm-hmm.
And Caiaphas, who was the high priest at the time, actually, and this is how God works, right? He spoke through someone who was a non-believer, and he prophesied that it's good that one man die for the whole nation, basically. So in the process of Jesus being tried, he's beaten multiple times. He had a hood over his head so that he couldn't see the blows that were coming to him.
Ooh, man.
Yeah, it was absolutely brutal. This is also a prophecy from Isaiah 53 that it says he was bruised for our iniquities. He was beaten beyond recognition, basically. So, and also the process of how he would have been flogged or whipped. There's a description of like basically what the whip would have looked like.
The cat of nine
tails. It's basically, it's a leather whip, and at the end, it's got these different balls or maybe shards of glass, or also
crazy.
balls with spikes that are woven into the material, so that it would actually, when the guy would come down with the whip on the person's back, it would latch into their skin, and then it would rip off flesh every time. Now with the Roman, the way this was like a Roman punishment, right? And so we've heard a bunch of times that it was only like 29 or 39 lashes, but with the Romans sometimes it was more than that.
Well, it was like they did it just it was a sport, you know what I mean?
And they called it the half death, because before they would be crucified, they would be whipped like that, basically the person would be half dead at that point.
Yeah, you could see sometimes the organs from the back side of the person.
It was an absolutely brutal beating.
Yeah.
So by the time Jesus, and they forced him to carry his own cross,
and then you got that wood on there, and you got the
it would have been horrendous.
It would have been hard.
So then when he gets onto the cross, basically the way people died on the cross was by
asphyxiation.
Asphyxiation.
Yeah.
Because the way when his hands would be hung like that, as he's hanging down, your lungs open up and you actually can't breathe.
Yeah.
The position they need. So what happens is they would have to the person would have to push themselves up with their feet or with their shoulders.
Yeah.
To take a breath, and then they would settle back down, and they couldn't breathe anymore. And you actually brought something up about the nails in the feet.
Yep. Well, and that's the thing is like, they've found like we said before,
Yeah.
actual burials of people with the nails
Yeah.
that got stuck in the foot. Because what happens is when they bury people, right, is they have to, if they don't bury them by the nightfall, then they have to wait till the next morning. So when they would crucify somebody,
Okay.
they would rush them into the grave. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because in Jewish customs,
Yeah.
if you didn't get buried, then they would be sitting up there, and the Jews would have been very, very, very upset
because
for
of the
that,
cleanliness laws, or
because of just how they honor the dead.
Okay.
That's the thing about Jesus. Is he may not have had what is it? An honorable burial, but he had a proper burial, is what they say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the idea that Jesus didn't really die is absolutely ridiculous. Also, so what they would do at the end, or to speed up the death, is that they would break their shins, or they would break their knees, so that the person actually couldn't lift themselves up anymore. Now they're hanging down, and they will die by asphyxiation. But what happened in the case of Jesus is that, see, you got to understand, like, for us, we don't know what death looks like because we haven't seen it, right? But with the Romans, they've seen it constantly. They would do
these crucifixions either at a crossroads or up on a hill where everybody could see them, like in Jesus' case, and they did this particular crucifixion on Passover. So every Jew that you would know would be in Jerusalem, that would go there. You know what I'm saying? So,
everyone would be a witness.
So the crowd would be massive, right?
But so the idea that the Roman guards or whoever's in charge would maybe misidentify the body, that, well, he wasn't really dead, he just was asleep or whatever. It's just ridiculous. They know what someone looks like when rigor mortis starts to set in, when the blood stops flowing. You can see almost immediately when death sets in. And so, but even so, just to be safe, they still pierced his side
with a spear.
And this is something that I actually didn't know, but because the Bible says that the blood and water came out.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long time, people didn't know why that was. Like, scientifically, we just found that out relatively recently.
Oh, yeah?
So for a long time, people would have ideas like how to allegorize why that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, now we understand why that is the case. So you said it before. Actually, I'll let you explain. You explain better than I do.
Yeah. I know that for me, the way that I see it, and the way that I never heard it or anything like that. This is why I was interested in sort of what you were saying, but is that I've said this before. So if you wanted to cleanse yourself, right, what you would do is you would pour yourself into the Word, all right? And Jesus is the Word made man, right? So whenever his blood was running through him or whatever, when they pierced his side and water came out, see, he had purified the blood already. And so that water came out, pure water. Yeah. And so even like in the Chinese symbols when we were learning, right?
Yeah.
That the lamb will be sacrificed and he will wash you with water. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you'll be cleansed, which is amazing. I mean, you're just like, and he is called the living water. Yeah. So, I mean, all of that to say that in that little microcosm of space where those things happened is sort of the way that God works. It's like there's no lie in the event.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Even the piercing of the side and the water and all that has a purpose. And in fact, the guy who pierced his side, the water hits him, and immediately he knows that it's God.
Right.
Like instantly he's changed.
Yeah.
Because he actually got the pure water on him.
Yeah, right.
Which, I mean, baffles me.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened to that guy when that happened? You know what I mean? The transformation. Because he's the one that pierced. Like, could you imagine the malice and the anger and the grossness of that person piercing?
Yeah, right.
That guy on there, he didn't give a nothing about him, know?
He probably did it 100, I don't know how many times,
Dude, they would just toss the bodies.
If that was his job, he would have done it constantly.
They would cast lots for their clothing and all that stuff.
That shows just how callous they were to death. Like,
and this dude was instantly changed.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So the fact that Jesus died, or the fact that he was crucified and that he died, is a historical certainty, as certain as you can get for something historically, right? So that's the kind of the first point that I've got. The second point that I've got, and you can whatever you know.
No, I'll just throw it in whenever you're going.
Cool. So the second point that I've got is the ladies were the ones who found Jesus.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because in a Jewish culture, see, if you were to ever like create a story about something like that, you would not use women to be the
primary witness.
Yeah, you would really who you would use is you would use the top Pharisee, right, or Sadducee. Right. Either way, you would use the top guy to be the witness, basically. Right. So that's
the most credible.
That explains what you're saying. Like,
So again, this just like the water and the blood. That's recorded, even though they didn't understand why it happened. Right.
Yeah.
The same thing here. This is embarrassing, right, for the Christians at the time, because the what do you call it? The value of a female witness is, I think, about a quarter of a man's value. Yeah. So if a woman, anyways, they
wouldn't even listen to her.
Basically, women don't have in their culture. Women did not have the same, what do you call it?
Weight or voice,
weight.
Yeah. Whenever it came to like a legal matter, basically is what you would say.
So the fact that the disciples and the apostles who wrote down this account, they wrote the truth down, right? Because the truth was, Mary and Mary Magdalene were the ones who found Jesus first.
They don't all get it right, they don't all say the same exact thing,
right?
But that's another thing that we'll cross later. But that's another reason why you would be like, if these guys were telling a lie, they suck, bro. They suck,
Yeah. So they were certainly telling the truth, because that's an embarrassing truth.
Yes.
If they were lying, they would have said. They would have said like Caiaphas found, the high priest at the time, or if they were making it up, they wouldn't use women that at the time were such an uncredible source that people would automatically be like, oh, well, I'm not going to believe you because the women found him.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to believe you guys. So you got the fact that women found them at the tomb is a indication that it's real, that it really happened. It's true.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So the third one I've got, like I said, you jump in any time.
Well, I was going to say, then you got there's the conspiracy theory too, which I think that one's like the most used, right?
Right.
Like you have the disciples, right? You have people, his followers.
Yeah.
So they're pretty attached to the guy, right?
Right.
So it'd be embarrassing if your Messiah it was over, right? So now we're going to go ahead and create, like we were talking about, create a storyline, steal the body, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But that flies in the face of a lot of things right there.
No, that's actually a good point, because before we get into that, I just will quickly say,
okay, go ahead,
because that's another one that I forgot about. That the fact that another thing that's recorded is, Peter is at the time, Peter was basically the head of the church, right? Mm-hmm. Peter, but Jesus said, he didn't say. Well, anyways, basically, Peter's the head guy, right?
Yeah.
Peter wrote down the fact that before Jesus was crucified, 3 times he denied him.
Yeah.
So if you're making the story up, if it was me, I certainly wouldn't want to add that in there.
Well,
I actually denied my Lord. Jesus is God, and I'm making this up, and he rose from the dead, and also I denied him 3 times.
Yeah. Well, and that lends to the fact there's also people who say like, okay, the disciples, if the disciples knew about it, knew that he was going to be crucified, right? Then they would have been able to prepare for the whole situation, right?
Right.
But the thing is as we read in the Bible, that they didn't know, and some people believe like there's no way they didn't know. Actually, they wouldn't have known. That would have been like really, really hard to like understand. In fact, they don't know, because of what you're saying too is why would Peter jump out and try to cut the guy's ear off? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Jesus like, get thee behind me, Satan.
Right.
You know what I mean? If he knew.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Because this is the thing, and this is actually, it speaks about it in the Bible, but for whatever reason, the disciples' eyes were basically blinded, because Jesus told them.
He sort of told them that y'all are not going to even understand what I'm saying.
He told them straight up. He was like, the Son of Man must be crucified, and he told them multiple times, like, now the Son of Man is given over to me. He would tell them over and over again, like, and Peter even said, Not so, Lord. No.
Not as long as I'm with you.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
And what does Jesus say to him? Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah, exactly.
So they clearly, like you said, they didn't understand the scope. And I mean, who would?
No.
I wouldn't have understood.
No, you're talking about your God.
Yeah.
You're claiming your God.
Right.
And you're going to die.
Right. Yeah,
God don't die.
I would not. If I was Pete, if I was one of those guys, I would not be the one
Who
guy
would?
that's like, oh, I know what's going on. You know, oh, I got it. Really.
Yeah, who would? God doesn't die.
Right.
And in the overall scheme of things, God does not die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My God doesn't die.
Right.
You
so
know?
It's
He's not God if he dies.
Right. Oh, okay. So that gets back to the conspiracy.
Yeah,
theory.
exactly.
So the conspiracy theory is that all of the disciples conspire together. So, I mean, the hoops you got to jump through to think that this is like the most reasonable explanation is ridiculous. Because so Jesus dies, he's and then he's buried in a tomb, right? The Pharisees were given a guard by the Romans.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been up to 16 guys. We don't know how many it was. Maybe it was like 16 guys that are guarding the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Romans are so strict that if any of them fall asleep, it's the death penalty.
Like,
these guys are hardened soldiers. They're experienced. They're not dummies. Okay. Yeah. There's a Roman seal on the tomb. If anyone messes with if somebody decides to you die if you mess with the Roman seal. So the fact that these 12 fishermen, tax collector, whatever these guys are,
like grown men, not one, not two, probably 3 or 4, to roll that stone away as well.
Yeah, because what they would do also is that they would bury like a ditch in front of it.
Yep.
So when they would roll the stone,
it would fall
into like a divot.
So you'd have to pick it up, basically.
Yeah. It's just So let's say that they somehow get past the Roman guards. They obviously had to either kill him or bribe him or something like that, which is pretty ridiculous because the Roman guards are under threat of death if they do any of this stuff.
Oh man!
So that they steal the body, right? They get the body. Now, let's say Peter is having a conversation with Paul, who at the time is an enemy of Christians. Paul is such an enemy that he's literally persecuting Christians to the point of death.
Yeah.
Peter and Paul get together, and Peter says, "Paul, I got this really good idea. I'm gonna lie. I'm gonna say that Jesus rose from the dead." Okay, and Paul's like, "Okay, what are we gonna get from it?" Well, I'm already poor, but you're going to be poor too. We're not going to have any kind of money. People are going to think we're crazy. We're going to get beaten by the Jewish authorities. Obviously, all of your friends are going to think you're an idiot because you're a Pharisee and you previously were denying the resurrection. Now everyone's going to think you're crazy. We're going to be constantly persecuted. Our family's going to think we're crazy, and then eventually we're going to be probably martyred for what we think.
Yeah.
What we're preaching, the fact that Jesus really rose from the dead, when in actuality he didn't.
But you know what?
Isn't it
a good idea? But you know what? People will remember us.
Yeah, isn't it a great idea? What do you think, Paul? When you think about any other of the, like for example, what's his name? The guy, the Mormon guy, Joseph Smith, right?
Yeah.
Joseph Smith at the end of his life, he had 19 wives. He convinced some of his other followers that they should give them their wives because if they do, then they'll get glory. If Muhammad, he had, I think 9 wives.
9 wives. And he married his 9-year-old cousin.
He had, he was a warlord.
9 years old.
He had all kind of success. I mean, this dude, these other, when you look at other examples, if you're trying to think, or if your idea is that Christianity is just made up, that these guys were making it, you got to understand for this whole conspiracy theory to work, what did the disciples benefit from?
Nothing.
They got their asses kicked constantly.
Mm-hmm.
They were ridiculed by everyone.
Right.
Everyone thought they were crazy.
Yep.
And then eventually they were so persecuted to where they were all 12 of the disciples were martyred.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about like just a quick death. Some of them were filleted, which means they had their skin peeled off of their body. Some of them were.
That's disgusting.
Some of them had their heads chopped off. Peter was crucified upside down. At any point while they're being tortured, because this is what Saul would do before he became Paul. Saul would break into someone's house and he would torture them and say, "You need to stop saying you're a Christian." So at any point, Peter, remember, this is the conspiracy theory, right? Peter knows this is a lie. Peter knows he made it up. At any point in him being tortured, he can just say, "Okay, I made it up. Sorry, I made it up." It's like
instead he's crucified upside down at the end.
This is what I mean when I said earlier this is the most reasonable explanation.
Yeah.
I know it's like, if any of you are listening are skeptics, I know what I'm telling you to believe in is a miracle. But if you give me any other explanation,
why would you believe anything else
Yeah.
of this kind of matter if there wasn't a miracle in it?
Yeah. So anyways,
let me piggyback on what you're saying. So what he's saying is, that the conspiracy theory is insane. To support that, this kind of death, as I said earlier, the Messiah dying on a cross, to the Jews would have been embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like, this would not be a story they want to be that they wanted told. Their Messiah gets crucified. Your Jesus gets crucified. In fact, I don't remember the writer who. There's a couple of writers out there,
Josephus?
In the 2nd century or whatever, where they're like, your Messiah got crucified. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, they're sort of making fun of the whole situation.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So that's when and then on top of that, when he gets crucified, the disciples are done, dude. They're done. Like, they all just sort of spread out and go their own way, go back to what they were doing.
They go into hiding.
Yeah, they go into hiding.
Because I'm assuming they probably thought they were going to get killed too.
Yeah, dude. Well, you conspired with this guy.
You're one of his followers.
Right?
So sorry to interrupt you, but the reason why Peter denied Jesus 3 times is because he saw what's happening to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so he's thinking, uh-oh, same thing's going to happen
We're
to
next.
me.
Yeah.
I'm next.
Yeah.
And because a little girl asked him, aren't you one of his followers?
No, I'm not.
No, I'm not. I never knew the man. And three different times he's asked that question.
Yeah.
And he denies. But why did he deny it? Because he was afraid that same thing was going to happen to him.
Exactly.
That same guy, to your point, that same guy who was so terrified that he was going to get killed because he saw what was happening to his Lord, his Messiah, whatever, however many years later, he's being hung upside down on a cross.
Exactly.
And he willingly goes to
so they're embarrassed, so that they're defeated. The disciples are defeated, right? And so they go into hiding, and they have no message for nobody. They got nothing, right? So then all of a sudden, out of the blue, all of them are on fire.
Yeah, right.
And then they start spreading the message immediately, right? And they start changing their environment. Yeah. People are being converted, all these things. Why would that happen? If at one point they're just dead in the water, and then all of a sudden, 3 days later, they're on fire.
They're outside preaching, and then one of the
with authority too,
And that's right. And one of the first things that happened to the disciples in Acts, I don't know if it's Acts 2 or not. They go and they preach Christ risen, right? They preach that Jesus Christ physically rose from the dead. And what happens? The Pharisees take him in, they question him, and then they beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, immediately.
So it wasn't like they got literally no benefits from.
And the thing is all of them started when they asked those guys, they could have said, what you say that the Christ has risen, you need to tell us the truth, He goes, if I told you anything else, I would be lying. I'm just telling you what we saw.
Yeah, right.
And what we experienced. I'm telling you the truth. And still they got beat. But that's the point, is like, they had an opportunity to even lie about it, because we know that Peter lied, right? Just 3 days before.
Right.
Peter lied that he didn't know Jesus, but now he's in front of the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Roman emperors, and all that's they're going to the highest officials, and claiming that Christ has risen. Why would you do that? That's suicide, bro.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
especially like you said, after seeing what happened to Jesus.
I mean, it's just it's more proof that the resurrection is true. There would be no reason for those guys to do that. Plus, they were already dejected. They were done. And it even says in Luke, I got it right here, Luke. Yeah, Luke 24:21, where he's like, what does it they say? The disciples said they had hoped he was the resurrection, but he is not.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? They had hoped he was the resurrection, but, he was not. They're done. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're on, like, changing the world. It's not just, they didn't just change a little bit. They changed the world.
Right.
Time started.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second.
Right. What year is it? 2023.
Yeah.
Since when? Why isn't it 30-33? Why isn't it 40-33?
Because Jesus died and rose again, dude.
Yeah, he's the center of our history.
Like, think about that, guys. Like, time stopped and started. You know, the only thing that we have done is ruin it. Basically, we put 2 more months after freaking Caesar's into our calendar, so we no longer follow God's timing.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that man has done to manipulate this message into being nothing.
Right.
And this is the only reason why we live. Is this?
Yeah. All right. So we've got a death by crucifixion. The death was certain. The ladies found the tomb empty. The witnesses, and then I've got independent appearances of Jesus after his death, which we're kind of getting into right now a little bit.
Yeah.
But and this gets back to I can't remember where the passage is, but Paul, in one of his earliest letters, it's in Corinthians, I'm pretty sure. He's writing to people, and he basically says, if you don't believe it, go and ask the people that were there.
Yeah,
they're still alive.
Yeah.
So this is the other thing. If you're trying to tell me that Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, it would have been so easy. This thing would have been squashed like immediately.
Yeah.
Because Jesus dies by crucifixion. That's historically a certainty, right?
Mm-hmm. Then
you've got, like you said, the same followers of Jesus. All of a sudden now, out of nowhere, they're preaching the fact that Jesus has risen from the dead, and they're getting persecuted by it. If that wasn't true, it would have been so easy for anybody to be like, no, he's right over there. I just went to his tomb the other day.
Yeah.
I know exactly where he was buried.
Exactly.
It would be literally the easiest thing to disprove. And this is the thing, that the Christians were not. They had many dissenters that were trying desperately to prove that Jesus really was still dead. And there's a movie about it. A guy who was he was a Roman official, and his whole job, whoever it was, Pilate, I think, told him, this is just a movie, right?
Yeah.
But he told him, like, dude, you got to find that body.
Yeah.
I don't care what you do, find
I've seen
that body.
Movie. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so the guy, he starts asking everybody, and he's
busting doors down.
He goes on a journey to find Jesus' body. He's like, dude, you need to because the Romans are thinking there's an uprising about to happen.
Yeah.
So they're like, dude, you better find this thing and squash this thing quick.
Oh,
Same with the Pharisees. The Pharisees are like,
the part in that movie is that when he does find him.
Yeah.
Because he kicks the door down where the disciples are, and he looks in, and Jesus is sitting
right there.
And that dude's just like,
yeah,
he's just stunned, man. Like,
amazing,
dude.
bro.
Yeah.
And the conclusion of that one is that he becomes one of his followers.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. We keep saying this, right?
Yeah.
This is what happens. If you are honestly going to start going on a journey, and you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to find out if Jesus is real or not. I'm going to find out this stuff is true. I'm going to disprove the Bible. I'm going to
whatever your reasoning.
If you start going for it, and you're like, I am going to do this thing. I'm going to go on this journey. What's going to end up happening inevitably is you're going to become one of his followers,
or you're going to be a denier. You'll know it's true. But deny it out of pride.
You say, I can't believe this because,
Yeah.
So the independent appearance. So we've got a death by crucifixion.
Well, let's before we hop onto that next thing.
Sorry.
So, resurrection. Let's get back to that term, resurrection, to rise from the dead, right? Well, there are others that have risen from the dead, right? You got the little girl, right? That Jesus brings back to life. The little boy brings back to life, right? And then you got Lazarus, right? So, the difference is that Jesus rose himself from the dead. Jesus rose those 3 from the dead. Yeah. But at the same time, you can go to Bethel, right? Not Bethel. I don't know. Bethlehem.
Okay.
And see the tomb of Lazarus there, and you can also go to Cyprus and see his other tomb where he died the second time.
Oh, really?
See, he's got 2 tombs.
Right.
In addition to that, to support the fact that Jesus wasn't in the tomb, in the Jewish tradition, they go back once the body has decomposed, right? A year later, and they take the bones and they go bury them in an ossuary, right?
Okay.
So they have they call it the second burial, right?
Okay.
And there's no bones for Jesus, you know what I mean? Because the tomb's empty. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So there's those kind of things too, and that's the problem with most Christians today, and including myself, is when I read the Bible, I try to do the Romeo and Juliet, Leonardo DiCaprio thing where I try to modernize that sucker. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like make it like in today's
Make
world,
it fit into our understanding, our paradigm.
Yeah. But no, there's a society there. Yeah. Jesus is a Jew, so he lives by their standard, right? And he fulfills their law and walks in that. But he walks in grace and mercy, and he shows them that this is how you fulfill the law, like this. And can you do it? No.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it for you,
right?
And that's the thing. He's the judge, and he is the jury. Yeah. And he's the executioner, you know what I mean? Right. So the judge takes himself, puts him in our place, himself in our place to go and be crucified. It's just an amazing love story is what it is.
Yeah. So we've got, I just want to keep giving you a summary so you guys are kind of able to digest this stuff, right?
Yeah, it's a lot.
A death by crucifixion. The ladies find the tomb. You got independent appearances of Jesus after his death. Mm-hmm. Then we've gotten into it quite a bit actually already. Violence endured by the apostles. So, like I've said before, all the apostles, all the Christians today are persecuted to the point of death.
Oh yeah, all over the world.
So this is something I actually thought about this before I ever heard of.
Our religion is the most persecuted in the entire planet.
Yeah. I've thought about
this. It's not even a religion either.
Yeah. It's a relationship.
That's it. It's a relationship. It's a way. Right. It's the way. It's the only way.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. I thought about this before any apologist ever brought this point up, but I thought because you could say, okay, yeah, sure, the people will die for something that's a lie, right? Like let's use whatever 9/11 or whatever example, for someone who's going to kill themselves for the sake of their religion. But the reason they do that is because they believe it's true, right? Mm-hmm. So the difference between someone who's like, I hate to use that example, but it does happen, right? Of like a suicide bomber or something like that.
Yeah.
Versus the first century Christians and the disciples, they went to their deaths, but they knew what they were dying for. If the conspiracy theory is true, they would have known what they're dying for is actually not true. No one dies for something that they know in their heart and in their mind is a lie. Nobody makes up a lie
and then dies for it. That's just doesn't make any sense.
So the fact that the apostles and the disciples endured violence is another tick in the box that shows that it's true, that it really happened.
Yeah, I agree.
So this is the last one I've got, and I think this is actually a really interesting point. The enemies of Christ were converted. So and you of course I've talked about Paul a little bit, but like this is one of the greatest evidences or a reason why to believe something is true. If you've got somebody who is adamantly against something, right? He's like Paul. Mm-hmm. He's so against it to the point where he's
the one case in which almost verifies the resurrection to be true. Bar none, like just done.
He was there when Stephen was stoned. Uh-huh. He was holding people's coats in approval.
In approval,
right?
Yeah.
While one of the Christians is being killed, and then he goes on with authority, and he kills more Christians.
Yeah, well, that was his thing.
All right, so you got this guy Paul, right? He's an enemy of Christians. He's persecuting them. On the road to Damascus, he encounters the risen Christ. And someone who was previously an enemy of Christians is so convinced that he meets the risen Christ that 3 days later, he's already in the temples preaching the fact that Christ is risen and that he is the way, the truth, and life. And then Paul writes some of the most amazing letters showing how Jesus was the actual fulfillment of the law.
And how we amazing letters, dude.
Man, the stuff that Paul said would have been so hard to digest for a Jew at the time. We're going to get into that later.
In fact, like, just to support that, Peter was at odds with Paul in the way that he was teaching.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you think about it, Peter gave his life pretty much on the spot. Said, put your nets down and come follow me.
Yeah.
And so they did, you know.
Right.
Paul, nah, that's not the way it happened, bro.
Right.
He was anti-Jesus, right? And then Jesus meets him on the road to Damascus.
Yeah.
And, you know, he sees the Lord. Like, Paul sees the Lord talks to him. In fact, the Roman soldiers that were with Paul heard a voice.
Right, but they didn't
see anything.
Right.
And then now Paul's blind.
Yeah.
You know? That story in itself, just so he understands that from a different perspective, what Christ has done.
Right.
He has shown mercy.
Yeah.
And he has shown grace
on
even those that killed his own people.
Yeah, exactly. If Paul, who says himself, he says, I'm the chief of sinners, right? Mm-hmm. If Paul is able to have forgiveness, anyone's able to have forgiveness.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of
Christ himself. I mean, that's And again, without the resurrection, there's nothing. You have nothing. Yeah. You got nothing, man.
And I get back to the very beginning, right? Our faith is predicated. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Upon one event, Jesus died, and 3 days later he rose from the dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that doesn't happen, then there's no Christianity. Christianity never would have existed.
And you would ask the question, why did Jews believe what they believed so fervently beforehand? Let me tell you why. Because the experience that they had with God, they had experiences with God that were
impossible.
You're talking about
parting of the Red Sea,
Mount Zion. I mean, you know the
which, by the way, sorry, real quickly.
Yeah,
that's the only mountain in the world that at the very top of it, it's like
burned. I don't know if black.
It's burnt at the top.
Yeah,
almost like the story was really true and it really happened.
It was
almost true. Like it really happened. Like
all those things are true, though, dude. Like all that stuff is true.
The parting of the Red Sea.
Yeah, if you go back and all that, if you can get to these places, right?
Yeah. Then
you will find evidence there that the obelisk of where they went into the into the Red Sea, right? Well, you know how they had fire fall on them? Like it's melted right there in that area on the sand. The sand is still melted. If you just go out to the sides, it's not melted, but the sand is melted, bro. Like it's like, what? Why? Because God is real, number one, but number two, all this evidence and all these things, dude, they've found the ways that the water has been channeled and how they would put rocks in a certain way so that it would push the water one way, and they would put rocks in the other way, and they would find those little bitty deals, dude. Yeah. It's just amazing, dude. Yeah. Like all that stuff is just, to me, there are people finding this evidence, but you know, we have people who don't believe it in the first place, so they just cast it off.
That's perfect. That's perfect segue to what I was going to say. This guy, the sermon I took a lot of these notes from. He at the very end of it, he talked about the duckbill, the platypus, right?
Oh yeah, you would never.
He said basically how when they brought this to England and they said, we found this thing. It's not a mammal. It's not a amphibian. You know, like we don't know how to classify it, right? It's basically like a mystery, you know.
Yeah.
And so they speak about this thing, and the scientists in England are like, yeah, no, we don't believe in it.
That's not real.
And so they're like, okay, we'll bring a pelt. So they take an animal pelt, they bring it back. They're looking at the pattern of it. Nah, I think this was fabricated. I think it was sewn together. Nah, they don't believe it. So they finally they capture one of these animals. They bring it back. They're looking at the thing, and the scientists are just like, I just don't know, man. I'm telling you, literally, they literally didn't believe it, but when they saw it, there are going to be some people, and there's a lot of atheists.
That's so crazy.
There's a lot of atheists online.
That's nuts, dude. It's so crazy to me, dude.
Yeah, they've already decided. No. God doesn't do that. There's no way. There's no. You can tell. They've already decided. It's ridiculous, so we could bring this stuff. We could bring up evidences. I can talk about. I heard a debate just to this point. This guy he was debating an atheist, and he said, let's say you had signed documents, affidavits from the Roman guards. Mm-hmm. They saw him die. 3 days later, they saw him rise from the dead. And they signed it. These guys are not Christians. They're just straight up professionals, and their profession is they're Roman generals or whatever. They're Roman guards. Would you believe it then?
Mm-hmm.
And the atheist said, no, I wouldn't. So it's like
there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. There are certain things, there are certain people, I should say, it doesn't matter. They're never going to believe it.
Yeah.
And they're called skeptics.
Yeah. Well,
and the Bible talks about them. They're scoffers. These people that they'll mock you. They'll make fun of you. And this is the thing that the Bible is pretty clear about these type of people. It says it. I'm thinking of multiple verses right now, but it basically in Psalm 10, it says the fool has said in his heart. Sorry, Psalm 14. It says the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. What's the fool? The fool's folly is that he doesn't believe in God.
Yeah.
Right? In Romans, it says that professing themselves to be wise, they became fools.
Yeah.
You've got all these scholars and all these with education and stuff, and they think they're so wise. But this one fundamental thing about Christianity, they just are like, nah, brah, I can't believe it. It's not. There's no way.
Well, and that's the thing is God chose the people that were of meek standard. He chose the little guy. He chose David. He chose Moses, who couldn't speak very well. You know what I mean? He chose Abraham, who wasn't very good at like presenting himself. You know what I mean? All that kind of thing. And that it wasn't. He chose Abraham, and Abraham had to go and he chose Moses, and Moses had to go back to Egypt after he had killed a guy there.
Yeah, right.
Like, could you imagine the fear in him when Jesus spoke to I say Jesus, but God, same person, spoke to him? Like, could you imagine the fear that he had? He was like, "Not me, Lord. I can't talk, man. I stutter." Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden you stutter. No,
exactly.
No, because it's just true. Like, God didn't choose the scholarly. He didn't choose the most intelligent people to lead. He chose somebody of humility, somebody with a humble standard, because he knew that he could use those people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And it's very interesting to me because God is always looking for somebody who is willing to be vulnerable and show their weakness.
Yeah, right.
Because that's where he shows up.
Yeah.
Which is amazing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can just kind of summarize these the criticisms.
Just one more point. Yeah. What makes Jesus and the resurrection like pretty significant is that he called it. He
seriously.
He was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the cross and I'm going to die. In fact, he knew it so much that when he prayed to the Lord, he asked himself to take the cup of, he asked the Lord to be like, take this cup from me, man. I don't want to take on the sin of the world, because he knew what it was going to take.
Yeah. Because
even though he was fully God, he was also fully man, and he felt everything you and I would feel. Yeah. He experienced every emotion of that situation, and you think that he didn't have any fear on that at that moment? He did have some fear. He was trembling while he was doing this. And then still, he goes to the cross by choice. Because obedience, although better than sacrifice, what obedience does is it leads to sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, and the sacrifice becomes natural then, right? It's a natural order of things.
Yeah.
And so Jesus paid the price for all of us, So I'll let you wrap it up. Go for it, bro.
Yeah. So, we've talked about, the acronym here is ALIVE, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got A death by crucifixion. L, the ladies find the tomb empty. I, independent appearances of Jesus after the death.
Mm-hmm.
V, violence endured by the apostles. And then E, enemies of Christ converted. That's ALIVE. And then, so you've got the four theories. We've touched on pretty much all of them. That the four, I should say, criticisms.
Yeah.
Because, when you're faced with this evidence, right? You're looking at this mountain of evidence.
Yes,
Okay, this guy was real, certainly. His followers definitely believed he rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Enemies believed he died.
Yep.
But you're like, okay, well, I know he didn't rise from the dead because, there's no way that happened because I'm a critic. So you come up with these ridiculous ideas like he didn't really die. It's a swoon theory. Ridiculous. The fact that, well, maybe they all hallucinated. That's a literal theory. That's never happened in history ever.
Yeah.
So you can believe that if you want. If you do, you're crazy. The fact that Jesus had a twin, maybe his twin. It's like You think that his mom didn't know the difference between him and his twin? Stupid, bro. The last one that we talked about at length, the conspiracy theory that they stole the body. The disciples conspired, and what did they get for the conspiracy? They all died, just like Jesus. It's just
they didn't just die. I mean, you got Peter was crucified upside down. I think James was crucified on X, right?
Yeah.
And then his John his body was pulled and quartered, right?
Yeah, right.
You know, you're talking about gruesome deaths, torturous deaths.
At any point, they could have just said, "Oh, I take it back. I take it back." You know, John, the one who wrote Revelation, he was exiled, to Patmos. So, in conclusion,
yes,
this stuff it's as certain as you can get, right? So, like I've said it before, right? For me, at this point in my life, I'm 31 years old, right? I used to have lots of questions. I still do. I used to have doubts, right? I don't have doubts anymore when it comes to my faith in who Jesus was. I'm more certain that Jesus was the Messiah, that he rose from the dead, that he's God. I'm more certain of that than my own name, okay? Call me whatever you want, but that's my level of certainty.
And I'm gonna say it like my brother says, as he's a minister. It's not arrogance, it's assurance.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that's how we speak, is with assurance. We know the truth. We know that this is the truth, and we know that this is the way. The only thing that we've been called to do is to glorify him and to let others know that the good news has been here, is here, and it is for you, because he is coming. And I tell you what, think about what's going on right now. Think about it. We basically blew up the gas pipeline in an ocean. Our country did that. Okay. That's terrible, because they're about to go and talk about it here in a little bit. And then all of a sudden the next week we have how many? 2 chemical spills, a plant blow up, derailment of trains, and they all happened at mouths of rivers and all these things in the waterways. You think that those little events that happen coincidentally are not something that is about to turn into something super, super major?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just telling people, like, you need to get right with Christ. I'm not trying to scare the hell out of you. I'm trying to tell you that the time is near. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
And that if you're not right with Christ, I mean, you're seeing celebrities that, I mean, Will Smith even posted that he needs to get right with God.
Really?
Yeah. And, that dude is way out there.
Yeah, I feel bad for him.
Yeah, me too. But anyway, so, like, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I mean, things are happening that are crazy, crazy. And this is a weird way of things that are happening.
Yeah.
Because it's all subversive.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, this is real. This is oh, he also gave the sign of Jonah too. But anyway,
okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, when people try and as a criticism for Christians say, well, you guys are so certain, you think you know it all. It's like, I'm not certain of myself.
No,
I'm certain of my Lord.
That's right.
I'm certain that when I read the scriptures, that this is like the truth. I'm certain that I have a God who says in Psalm 12, the words of the Lord are pure words, tried in a furnace of earth 7 times, purified 7 times.
Yeah.
The Lord promised, he said, you will keep them from this generation forever. So I've got a God who promises that he's going to preserve his word. I got a God that prophesied 800 years before crucifixion was invented of how he was going to die, how he was going to fulfill the law, how he was going to die for us. So I don't have confidence in myself. I have absolute confidence in my Lord.
Yeah.
And I trust him completely.
Yeah.
And that's where my confidence comes from.
Well, and it should, because you know what? There's not only, they're not just words in a book, Yeah. There's spiritual aspects that apply to your life, to each individual. Like, the word is living, right? And that living word speaks to each individual that reads to them, and when you realize that you have not only a Father in heaven that created you, right? But that he wants to have a relationship intimately with you personally. Yeah. Like, not the same kind of relationship that he has with Marshall, not the same kind of relationship that he has with Katie. He wants to have a relationship with Jonathan, and he wants to talk with Jonathan. And because Jonathan has special purpose as much as everybody else, right?
Right.
And when you talk to him, he fills you in on that purpose, right? And he gives you comfort and he gives you peace, even in the times of need and in the times of strain. God, if you call on him, will comfort you. You know, it's not so much that the house is on fire, is that you have peace inside the house on fire. You know, like God gives you that peace when you need it. So, you know, that is the whole deal, is like, we believe in the resurrection because of what you're saying, not just because of the words in the book, not just because of but the relationship that we have. That's the number one thing. Yeah. But in addition to that, there is document upon document upon document of historical evidence, archaeological evidence that prove this all to be true as well. Now, there are pieces missing, as in there is in every historical thing. Right. But if you go into ancient documents, the Bible has, within 40 to 60 years, the first book was written about Jesus. It is the closest you can get to any historical figure. Yeah. Period. In fact, it's like almost at least 200 years closer. And then they have anybody else.
Well, when you think about like some of those books, how they were dated, because you got 0, right? It's Jesus when he was born, right? Mm-hmm. 33 is when he was crucified. Yeah. So, some of those dates are like 40, 30. I mean, they're like almost immediately
right on the money, dude. Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah. When you, anyways, we'll talk about that later. But
but still,
the early,
it's just more historical evidence to prove that this is all true. Yeah. It's not a belief system. Like, it's not a religion, is what I'm trying to say. It's not a religion. We keep identifying ourselves as religious or Christianity as a religion. It's not a religion. In fact, Jesus came to abolish religion. He was put on the cross by religion. So what we're here to do is to love and live in the way that Jesus Christ said. But that doesn't mean to like accept everything and just be like, oh yeah, you know what? Murder's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, any type of thing that comes across. No, it means that we need to live diligently and to love those who have chosen a way of sin, like the murderer or whatever, and give them the good news, because God shows mercy and grace even on those. Yeah. So.
Love it.
With that.
That's really good.
Love y'all. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Peace.